Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
I was listening to that thing the other day, the podcast, something about sound. What was it? SoundVaaibs? SoundVaaibs? Who came up with that name? Was that him? Was that Patrick? Did Patrick? Oh, Pat, hi.
Hey.
Sorry, that was just Hey, how you doing?
Better than you, clearly.
No, it's cool. Hey guys.
Nathan's embarrassed about the name of the show.
No, I'm not. Who said that? SoundVaaibs. Hey guys, how's your SoundVaaibs doing? Welcome to SoundVaaibs. I am NACE, joined by Mr. Patty McD.
Howdy.
How you doing, sir?
Yeah, no, good.
Good. I'm great. I'm energized. I'm ready for this.
Good. Yeah, well, I think we got a good momentum on the whole songwriting thing. Obviously, it's close to both of our hearts, and it's an area where we're trying to just become masters at.
Masters?
Yeah.
Us? Nah. Yes.
We'll get there.
We, and by that meaning us, you guys, everyone, we're on this journey together.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we seek mastership of this craft.
We must be masters.
Right, so last week we spoke a lot about, it was more conceptual discussion about focusing your songwriting towards a specific market or agenda. So that was cool, I thought.
It was interesting, very engaging. I mean, I almost got lost on that last episode.
Yeah, but it's cool because I noticed, listening back to it, it's like, I picked up a few things which had been rolling around in my head, obviously subconsciously.
Yeah.
But being forced to discuss it brought these things, more to the forefront of my mind and made me realize a few things that I could and should change about my exact current songwriting trajectory.
Okay. So you learned.
Yes, it's stuff that I knew or thought I knew, but it's it's so in the back of the mind. If we're not consciously evoking these thoughts and dwelling on them, then we're not really using them.
Well, I felt more empowered to speak up more on these things from the last episode. I feel like I'm a little bit more in a space where I can express creative opinions, I suppose. Whereas, I know this episode we're going to be tackling sort of the
nuts and bolts.
The nuts and bolts. Are we? Is that the name of the episode? Did you guys really? Is that the name of the episode? Okay. So basically, the nuts and bolts, we're going to talk about groove, melody, and what was that last one?
Progression.
Prog. We're going to get prog.
Yeah. All right. So basically, groove, melody, and progression as in how the song progresses, which, is obviously a big thing in music currently. A lot of people are trying to move away from how do we call it, that sort of strictly formulated song structure that was dominant for probably decades. I mean, look, there's always been prog bands, but I mean, the last 10 years or so, we've seen something of a prog movement.
Especially in the prog rock sphere.
Yeah.
Prog rock has become so popular nowadays.
Yeah. So let's start with the basics, the foundations. Groove.
Yeah, I groove a lot.
Yeah.
Groove is my favorite. Groove is my jam.
All right. So jam us some groove. Tell us about it.
Okay, so groove to me, right, is the minute you hear it, no matter if it's a build-up or if it's a just a little section of a song where your body just, without thought, without a second thought, just impulsively just starts moving. Just you feel like you can't stop, you can't help yourself. It's almost seductive. Your body's just saying, "Oh, you got to move now." Yeah. That's another thing in your brain that's going, "Well, this is so tasty, it's so groovy, I must move."
And I want more.
And you want more. And that is very, very important in a song. If your song is trying to achieve movement of any kind, groove is the first track you should be on. The first road you should be traveling is it groovy? Make it groovy. What can you do to make it groovy? This riff works with this drum part. This bass line is just on its own perfect. It doesn't need guitar. Keep the bass line on its own. If it's groovy and it's making you feel a certain way subconsciously, where you're acting it out physically, and it's physically giving you like that sense of euphoric, just and you get in a mood, you know?
Yeah, like I kind of get the feeling that the more, how do we say, like the more involuntary the physical movement your body starts to do,
yes,
the higher is the quality of the groove that's been laid down by the artist.
And that's a great example. I mean, just having that sense of, I'm gonna just, I can't help it anymore. And then you just start moving and people look at you like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What is this? It's like, it's this tune, listen to this tune. And then you go and you listen to it and it's like, oh wow, this is really cool.
Yeah.
And then they start bobbing their head, and then the next thing you know, bobbing turns into like headbanging, and then that turns into like moshing in a public space, and people start looking at you more weirdly and like, what's going on there? What's wrong with that guy? Like, you should listen to this tune, it's so groovy. And that essence, that groove essence is, again, I cannot stress this enough, it's so important.
It's like a building block to your strong song.
Yes.
And without
strong song
groove, you might find that whatever you're creating, look, not everything needs groove. Sometimes the absence of groove is the goal.
I'm biased towards this.
Or fair enough. But again, as you mentioned in the previous episode, like your focus is specifically
high energy,
social music,
yes,
live entertainment.
But from your side, is groove important?
In my opinion, always.
There you go.
However, that being said, if you're looking to evoke an emotional response, sometimes the absence of groove creates the emotion.
That's very true.
Yeah,
that's very true. If there is an absence of groove and there's another element in its place that is invoking some sort of deep-seated emotional trigger that makes you feel a certain way in another way.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily a physical shuck and jive.
Yeah.
Then groove needs to be absent in order for that element to shine.
Yeah. So I think as a songwriter, one needs to kind of look at groove as a tool in your songwriting toolbox. How you handle that tool is really up to you, and check the previous episode. What are you trying to achieve?
Exactly.
And I think with groove, I mean, this is obviously very based on drums, percussion, rhythm. Yeah. So if I think of an example of a band which always, to my mind, has an intensely, I'm speaking metal, but an intensely powerful groove, I always think of Pantera.
Yeah.
And the synergy between, it was the two brothers, Dimebag and Vinny. And I mean, brothers growing up together, they obviously had a lot of chemistry. But whenever a Pantera song comes on, whether I'm driving, whether I'm in a club, like wherever, whenever, I'm moved involuntarily. It's like, if I'm driving, my hand starts slapping the steering wheel. I don't have a choice in that matter. Whereas I find in a lot of metal music, especially in my peer circles, there's actually quite an absence of groove. There's a stronger focus on intensity.
And in some cases, melody.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. So groove being a tool in your musical toolkit is only one tool. So to write a compelling piece of music, we have to now examine what else do we have in this toolbox and how are we going to deploy it?
Well, melody being a very, very strong tool that is used, I would say, more broadly, more commonly in a lot of different genres. Without melody, look, a lot of people I've spoken to, showing them music that I enjoy, I would say to them, well, listen, this song is really cool. You might not like the vocals, but the melody's fantastic. And they've all come back to me like, oh, that melody was so catchy. It was so this, it was so that.
Yeah.
And a lot of songs that have a hook, it's usually a really, really catchy melody.
Yeah, like a melodic hook.
Yeah. And when you're doing a melodic hook, in most times, groove needs to be absent again. In fact, a lot of elements may need to be absent in order for the melody to shine. However, a lot of those elements need to be present in order to support the melody. I've had a few experiences where a song has been almost too melodic. Whereas it's no longer a hook, it's almost like one big hook, but it's not really a hook anymore because
you're talking about folk metal, aren't you?
But not even in just the metal scene, in a lot of jazz as well. A lot of sax players just don't stop.
Yeah, but I think jazz is a completely different animal. And I get the feeling that a jazz thing, well, look, I'm no expert in the genre, and I haven't attended that many shows, but I have seen, from what I have attended, I've seen a parallel between jazz and extreme metal. But when I talk about extreme metal, I mean like over-the-top extreme. It's almost like a power struggle.
Okay.
Oh, no. Yeah, it's not a power struggle that it's not harmonious, because that's the magic of it. The fact that it is harmonious, but when I say a power struggle, it's like now it's this guy's turn to shine, and oh boy, shine he will. And it's like he'll show off everything he ever learned.
Yeah, he's like that kid in school who excelled at everything, and now he's just like showing off to the class. Look, teacher, look, kids, look what I can do. And then you're like, wow, why? Yeah. It's so much.
Like jazz is like an artisan's genre.
Well, there are other ways that you can produce great melody without oversaturating, and oversaturation is another topic of discussion for a later episode. I would love to get into that, because oversaturation in a lot of things. Well,
I think this is like what you mean by when melody is oversaturated, it loses its meaning.
Yes,
it loses its power. So I mean, what is melody to the layman? The melody is the tune that you hum.
Yes.
Like when you're thinking fondly of a song that you, listened to recently or even distant back, there's a little tune, whatever that tune is, you feel compelled towards it because it was obviously a damn fine melody. And I think what you said earlier on is like when you deploy these tools together, melody and groove, oh boy, but one doesn't want to do that all the time, because then you oversaturate, it loses its power. But if I can think of another good example in my world of music listening, I think one band who really writes extremely powerful melodies would be Sabaton. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yes.
Kind of like power medley band, but like every single song starts with such a great melody.
Yes.
And then it goes on its journey, and sometimes the verses are very almost like devoid of the melody, but then the chorus comes back and that melody just sinks itself into your soul. And it's memorable. So I mean, that's just one example of where melody is deployed very powerfully.
Yes.
But I think also bands like I remember when In Flames first kind of rose to prominence back in I think it was the late 90s already.
Yeah, it was like 98, 99.
But I remember the 90s in the world of metal, melody wasn't a big player. It was more about groove and rhythm.
Yes.
And almost like tribal. If you think of bands like Sepultura, it was very stripped down basic on the melody front. It was
there was a genre that was pioneered back then that isn't really in our sphere, which was essentially called rhythm and blues.
Oh yes, yeah, exactly.
that was like a huge thing all the way up until the mid noughties, I think what you can call it. But a lot of melody in today's music, I feel that we're going through another shift, another cycle where a lot of melody is more on a commercial front, still prominent. In what we do, not so much. I've noticed that we're more leaning back towards, I say chugging a lot, because that's a lot of what the guitars are doing nowadays. They're just chugging along. and it's more rhythm and it's more bounce and it's more punch you in the face kind of groove that has become more prominent. And I think, over time, that cycle will then repeat itself.
Yes.
It'll be, in 10 years' time, it'll be melody again. And
but this seems natural in the music world.
Exactly. It's a constant progression and never-ending cycle until, some genius comes out of the woodwork and goes, I have this new concept. It's called gobbledygook. And when your song now has gobbledygook, it will be this much melody and this much groove and this much gobbledygook. And that element will then take prominence for a few years and then fall part of the cycle.
But I think it's also a question of like momentum.
Yes.
We as human beings, as social creatures, we do follow the herd to a large extent. Even if we, devoutly say, no, we are not followers. It's like there is a herd mentality. It's ingrained into us. And I think when we see something on the upswing, we feel naturally compelled towards it. And I think at the moment, what we're seeing very much in the upswing, or have been for the last several years, is, as we were saying at the beginning of the episode, like prog.
And natural progression.
Segue! Yeah, so, very important in songwriting is how does a song progress? And I think, when we look at like grunge music back in the 90s, like the like progression was very unsophisticated.
It was very simple, very bare bones,
which like had its own merits. But when we're talking about progression, what are we describing exactly? And I think we're talking about, instead of music just being, how do I describe this? Kind of like a snapshot. Like when you can hear a song which feels almost like it was just a snapshot of like a small piece of something.
Yes.
Whereas music which is more progressively inclined, oh boy, it's not a snapshot.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes of this thing, but it's going to keep changing very subtly. Very subtly. And it's going to keep on changing, and it will never go back to what it was. It's almost like a piece of Play-Doh when you're a kid,
Yes.
It will never go back to its original form, its original state. It will just constantly evolve and grow and progress and get more and more and more, or in some cases get less and less.
Yeah.
And, music has done that for the most part. For, I think more recently, it's become more popular, as we said earlier, especially with prog rock. A lot of their song structure becomes very catchy and, dare I say, groovy, or even melodic, and they never revisit that part. It's like the structure is completely changed. There's no more, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, whatever, the regular structure. It's now become verse, first chorus, verse, bridge, verse, chorus, outro, or something like that.
In a way, you could say it's a little less contrived than like the standard structures, which a lot of more popular artists tend to follow, and that's fine. Like a standard structure. Often we say a thing is cliched because it works.
Yes.
So deploying standard structure in songwriting, that's fine, that's cool. You're probably going to achieve your objectives doing so. But progression is just another very useful tool to have in your toolkit, which can be deployed for compelling songwriting.
It's true.
So, it's kind of, as you point out, not to have the listener become bored.
Yes.
Or to have their ear become fatigued with just another repeat of the same old thing they've heard before.
Yeah.
Which I think for, not every artist is strong in creating the groove element. Likewise, not every artist is particularly strong at creating the melodic element, but that doesn't mean they aren't strong at utilizing the progressive element. So these are three things which I've at least identified in the songwriting toolkit, which if one can harness the power of all three to whatever degree of skill.
Yeah.
But if you're using all three, you're probably going to have a better output at the end of the day than just using one or two.
You're going to summon the Captain Planet of music,
Yeah,
so,
pretty much.
Yeah, if you're using all your tools effectively, you will create a great song, a great piece of music.
Yeah.
Whether or not you are versed in all three, that's fine. That's okay. If you're more versed in using progression over, a combination of groove and melody, okay, cool. So your song is going to be a little more jumpy and different, and it's going to be different part into different part into different part, and there is an audience for that.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely an audience for that. There's an audience for any type of music. I mean, some audiences may be larger than others, and that's when another discussion we'll have further down the line is niche markets and so on. A lot of people prefer groove-based song structures. A lot of people prefer the melody. Some people just like to be screamed at. It's
there's whole genres based on just single components of songwriting.
Exactly, and those subgenres still have legitimate fan bases.
Yeah,
they do. However, if you are trying to achieve a target, or a goal in this case, let's call it a goal. If you're trying to cause your audience to fall for your groove song you've now written, but you are a melodic project, in order to transition them, you would have to find a balance between those two tools. You can't alienate your audience by going from one strength to something that's not exactly your strength yet. You need to build up to it.
Yeah.
It needs to be a gradual and, again, progression, in order to master that craft.
Yeah, all right. And then I think, with those components, there's another fundamental tool in the toolkit, which, I mean, we don't have enough time in one episode to discuss at length, but I think deserves an entire episode by itself. And that is the musical hook, or the songwriting hook.
What gets you?
Yeah. And I mean, a hook can consist of a specific groove or a specific melody or a specific progression. But more so, one has to ask, how does one find a hook lyrically speaking?
Something I know absolutely nothing about.
All right. Well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to spend the entire next episode becoming more familiar with that concept.
Someone teach me, please.
Yeah.
I can't write a hook to save my life.
Well, a hook can be very powerful when a lyric is employed hand in hand with, be it a groove, melody, or progression.
Yes.
So, I think we'll get into that thick and dirty.
Thick and dirty, huh?
Thick and dirty next week.
This is getting real, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening. We will be back at you next week with another episode of the Pure Audio Sound Room. What is this? What is this called?
Get it right, Nate.
What is
SoundVaaibs.
SoundVaaibs. SoundVaaibs. Remember the name, SoundVaaibs, because everyone knows I'll forget it. And I've been NAC. This has been Paddy McD. Thanks so much for listening. We will catch you on the flip side. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you.
Cheers and out.
Thank you so much for listening to us ramble on about all things music and sound here on SoundVaaibs, produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio.